Before I get started, I'm actually going to bring a little bit of a different kind of take on some of the conversation, because I want to give y'all some tools to take back with you, dealing with a particular segment of people needing self-defense. But that being said, there were some comments made earlier this morning about Boogaloo and the Boogaloo Boys. And there's some serious misconceptions about what some of those young men are doing. I helped to organize the Virginia rally with some of these guys. Thank you. And there's some serious misconceptions, and some of these guys are becoming exceptional leaders in their community. So if you have questions, I want you to come talk to me about it. I'm not going to use my time up here to talk about it today. I was going to light off. If you know me, you know I like to do that. But I'm not going to do that today. But if you really are talking about wanting to reach across the table and understand them, it's on some of us to do that, because these are younger gun owners, and we need to be able to start opening that dialogue. So I encourage you, thank you. I heard a little so I encourage you to come and talk to me about that, and let me give you a different perspective on some of these young men and what's going on. So that being said, for those of you that don't know who I am, and what my game is about, I started We the Female a little over a year ago. I'm from Washington State. Obviously, if you're a gun owner active at all, you know about 1639. That information went national. And I spoke out against several of the components of that as a very pro, I wasn't in the community, didn't even know a community existed, gun community, but spoke out against it, and it went viral. And I realized that this was an opportunity to be heard for domestic violence victims. So I'm a domestic violence survivor. My ex almost killed me. My face sags on one side. I got a great Botox guy, fixes that for me. But he fractured my nose, and I've got crowns on my teeth and things. So it was a pretty violent experience. And I did what I was supposed to do. I went through mental health care, as well as the judicial system, as I was supposed to. Did everything I was supposed to do, and the judicial system failed me. He was charged with a felony. When he left, it was dropped to a misdemeanor when he was arraigned, because he didn't use a physical weapon, right? Because his assault weapon was his hands. And then he was able to negotiate it to a diversion agreement, to which then he stalked me. He took a job as a delivery driver, a second job as a delivery driver, so that he could stalk me. So we're living in a culture where, and we're living in a culture that has a broken judicial system that continues to, well, it fails all of us, but domestic violence victims and survivors are exceptionally at risk for this. And there's continued laws put in place that inhibit survivors to be able to defend themselves, and most of these clearly are gun control laws. And a woman should never be denied the choice of how she defends herself, ever, ever. And every one of these laws, in particular red flag laws, are doing that. And so I'm going to help to give y'all some language about what we need to do to start embracing domestic violence. If y'all okay with that? You can handle that? So, because it's something that I'm seeing, there's a little bit of a disconnect in the community and domestic violence survivors, and I want to make sure that we're addressing that. So the law that in 1639, the one specific component that I spoke out about was the one where now when you sign that 4473, right? You know that background check that none of us do, right? Because we don't do we need background checks, because clearly in Washington State now, the minute you sign that, you put your name on the line, it's an automatic waiver of your mental and physical health care records. Right, so it's a giant HIPAA violation, but it's not, right, because you signed it away. So if you want to buy a firearm, you have to do that. Well, there's no criteria in there for what they will or won't deny. There's no criteria how far back they can look, and it is the mental health authority. Like, who's that, right? There was nothing. So, Margaret, who's pissed at her husband one day, can see my application, be pissed off because she sees I have PTSD, and that means I'm not stable, right, in her mind. And therefore I'm denied that day, which now opens it up to red flag laws, right? Because now they can red flag me too. So we have to start changing the language about how we're addressing domestic violence victims, and we have to start rethinking and understanding that we're living in a culture of victim mentality, right? We talk about that a lot, it's buzzwords, particularly with gun owners, but these women, domestic violence survivors, are not only legitimate victims of physical and emotional and mental abuse, But it is being encouraged and perpetuated for them to still live in that environment because the culture is supporting that. And then we have a government through their legislation that continues to encourage us to live that way. So when we're dealing with domestic violence survivors and victims just coming, either still in their situations or just coming out, one of the first things we need to understand is that they don't just get hit right away, right? There's this, we hear domestic violence survivor, and all of a sudden you think you got drunk one night and hit you. It can be months or years before they start hitting. So, and usually the emotional stuff does escalate at some point to physical, but it could take 6 months, it could take 10 years. Domestic violence survivors already believe that they are not worthy, in some cases, of even living, and that everything is already their fault, right? So they've been rewired in their heads to believe this, okay? So when we're coming in as gun owners, and I mean, like me, Kerry, I'm fiercely pro-2A. My organization doesn't lead with a gun, and here's why. Because when we lead with a gun, and you're coming in, you say, well, you just need a gun. What if she'd had a gun held to her head? You don't know that. Well, it's sorry to see that she died, right? If I'm posting, because I'm a big social media, I get my word out through social media. And I'll post things about women who the system failed and they died. Well, she should have been armed. That's victim blaming. And the minute that another domestic violence victim sees that, she's not going to come out about her situation for me to be able to get to her to help her. So we as a gun community need to start being careful about the language that we use surrounding that so that we can encourage these women to come forward and encourage them to learn that they are responsible for their own safety and that they are worthy. So I like to use the term, we want to arm the women with education, confidence, and self-defense. Because the minute that you educate a woman, she starts to build confidence, and as soon as she's confident, then she's going to realize that she's worthy of defending her own life and her children's lives. Okay? So what is important for me is I need you, as a domestic violence survivor working with these women, to start understanding that we need to change the culture of the language that we use. Even more so, if we look around this crowd, I love seeing as many women here as I do, by the way. It's great. But we're still a very male-dominated group of people here because that's the gun industry tends to be. What I need is all of you men to lead that charge. Because these other men are going to listen to you more than they are a woman, especially if they have some chip on their shoulder because they were falsely accused, or right? Because this stuff happens. I mean, I get both sides of these things. But when you see this, when you hear this in our communities, and when you hear this going on, or you're seeing it online on Facebook, because boy, Facebook and Twitter are like the Wild West of social media. And it's true. When you see that, we as a gun culture, if we want to start changing the culture of victim mentality, we need to be self-policing ourselves, right? You don't want them regulating us? Let's regulate ourselves so we don't give them a reason. Then, when they still try that crap, then we can come in and say, what is your real reason for wanting to disarm us? Because clearly it's not public safety, because we're solving that problem ourselves. So when we start to work and changing the language, a lot of things begin to happen and put in place, including calling our government on their crap legitimately with evidence. So when you see this, or when you're dealing with these women, or if you're a gun, how many people here are FFLs or own gun stores? Nobody?
Well, Mike does.
Well, Mike, okay. You're working on it? Awesome. So talk to me afterward if you want about that, because there's ways that we need to approach women, and it's not leading with the gun. We need to go in and start talking about how important it is for them to understand that they need to choose to defend themselves. Then engage them in conversation, get their trust. All right? Get them to trust you, get them to talk to you. Then you can start leading them in slowly with self-defense. Don't lead with that gun. The minute you mention gun, especially if they come back like this, there could be many reasons. They could have been programmed from their youth to not like guns, right? They could be these women that are very anti-gun. They could be a woman who's had a gun in the house and she had it held to her head. She could be a woman who had her guns taken away because her ex had her red flagged as a way to keep her in the house. Right? And now she's starting to develop this negative connection to that. I know that sounds kind of weird, and I know this is a little out of left field. I'm actually pleased to see so many of you guys actually like, what is she talking about? So, but it's because this is a disconnect that needs to happen, and all of us can stand up here all day long and talk about shall not be infringed. We know that. Spoiler alert, that's why we're all here. So is it really, are we wanting to be advocates for our own rights? If we are, we have to start looking at other ways instead of trying to just smash it straight on. We have to be, as one of my friends, Brandon, likes to refer to it as system hackers. And one of those ways to hack that system is to come in from the backside and start helping to train and rethink the culture of victim mentality by working with 1 in 4 women are domestic violence survivors. There are other women in this space right now that have been abused. I can promise you that. There's one right there. Who else? Stand up for me. Don't be shy. Are you abused? Look at that. Men, 1 in 7 of you. Stand up. How many men?
Believe it or not.
Look at that. 1 in 7 men. Right? This is a problem. And this is a problem that we can solve within the gut. Well, we can't, so you're not going to stop them. But you can help to arm these people, particularly women, to become more empowered to start taking responsibility for their own safety, because the government's already told us they don't have to. So we have to do that, but we're not going to hit them straight on. We're not going to come in and say, you know, with the anti-guns, but when we can hack that system, when we can get in and start teaching to change the culture of victim mentality through teaching these people that they can have confidence enough to know that their lives are worth saving, now you have a fight. Now you've got power, and especially with women, because there's a reason they try to suppress our voices, because we're loud and we're powerful. Women have only been voting for 100 years this year. This is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment being ratified, and it's the 100th anniversary of women casting the first vote. I encourage all of you to get out and get 2 people registered to vote, because that's how we beat these people that are continuing to keep us, or continue to try to oppress us and keep us in this victim mentality culture. Okay? Go out and get 2 people registered to vote. Try to make it women. You're going to be blown away by how many women aren't registered to vote. Stunned when you come to see it. And get them voting and have them understand that they are responsible for their own safety, and start to do it by coming from the backside and engaging them in a conversation to get them confident enough to realize that their lives are worth saving. Then we can start to work on ways that they can do it, starting with, you know, a martial arts class, starting with a knife, starting with a stun gun. If you come in with this tactic and you develop that rapport and you develop that confidence, they'll get a gun in their hand eventually, because they trust you telling them what to do. Does that make sense? So, because I know this is a little bit of a weird kind of conversation to come in with everybody's kind of hoorah, but I wanted to make sure I took this time to give y'all something to think about and understand that we all need you to be able to go out and engage these women in a different way, and to be careful about the language that we use so that they will be willing to come out to us so that we can solve the problem. So I appreciate your time. Thanks.